Hello. We are Married to the Movies, and for tonight's episode, we have an international film festival where we'll be taking you all around the world. We will be visiting 5 countries, and those countries are Australia, we have first, then we are going to go over to China, then we are going to Germany, then shortly after, Russia, and then last but not least, Japan. And I will let my handsome husband take it away.
Why, thank you, my beautiful wife. So just to be clear, when Married to the Movies does an international film festival, we've got to make sure that everyone is clear on the ground rules. So, for example, Alfred Hitchcock is an English filmmaker. He made American movies. Stanley Kubrick was an American filmmaker who made American movies in England while living in England. Those are American movies. So we're not referring to the national origin of the filmmaker, the writer, the cast, or the location that the film was made in. We are actually referring to the country that the film comes from. So the stuff that we're talking about tonight, these are not American films. They are films that came from foreign lands, made by foreign filmmakers that ultimately found their way to America through various means. And tonight we'll talk about some of our favorites from the countries that Kristen just mentioned. So I guess we'll kick it off with Australia.
Australia, we got Mad Max.
Mad Max.
By the great George Miller. Go ahead.
Well, people talk about The Road Warrior a lot, and that is a great film. For me, I always come back to the original Mad Max. We'd love to talk about Mad Max Fury Road.
Mm-hmm.
However, that is an American movie made by an Australian filmmaker. This was an Australian film that was exported and found its way to America. This is the original, and it's almost Hitchcockian in tone. It's very extreme, very dynamic. If you've seen Mad Max Fury Road, which we could probably dedicate a whole series of shows to, this is a very different feel. This is kind of in the early days of this post-apocalyptic situation, where there's still some semblance of civilization. So if you haven't gone back to the original, Max is a police officer. And in this film, he's in the police station, he's in a police car, he's doing his police officer duty. And then we find out what pushes him over the edge and transforms him into Mad Max. It all happens in this great masterpiece. We're talking about the foreign film element. When we look at this particular Blu-ray, it's interesting because for many, many years in America, if you were to see the original Mad Max, the folks who were responsible for releasing it felt that Australian accents would be too difficult for Americans to understand. So for many, many years, the only way to see Mad Max in America was to have it dubbed like a kung fu movie. Even though everyone in the film is speaking perfect English, they were all dubbed. And that's what makes Blu-ray releases like this so special, because, you know, for many years in America, you could see Mad Max, but you couldn't hear Mad Max. And it's definitely a different movie when you hear the actual actors speaking their own lines instead of having it dubbed like a kung fu film. Great masterpiece, visually striking, and I think one could make an argument for it to be maybe tied with The Road Warrior, perhaps, as Australia's greatest cinematic work of art. So today we're happy to have Australia represented by George Miller's masterpiece, Mad Max. If you haven't seen it, you should. It's an excellent, excellent film.
Very good. All right, moving on to China, we have Hero great, great movie.
Excellent film.
Sorry,
Zhang Yimou,
yes.
a genius.
Thank you. Thank you, my love.
I'll give some history and then you can give some impressions.
Hey,
if
that
you want.
works. That works.
So this is interesting because it's part of the wuxia film style that became very popular with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which did not make the cut tonight. Maybe on the next film festival. This is very much a martial arts film, and Zhang Yimou, the filmmaker, had never made martial arts or action films of any kind. He was very famous in mainland China as a drama filmmaker who made very serious, dramatic films. And then one day he decided to try his hand at this particular genre and did it with impressive results.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely impressive results. When we first viewed this, we were both stunned by the visuals. I always talk about the color scheme. It's a huge thing for me. I love films with very impressive coloring and visual, as it's just a very important thing for me. So this is going to fall into that category because you've got, just it's almost like different scenes. Well, it is different scenes, but you have different colors for each scene, color schemes, and it just, I would say if you were watching it in a dark room, it will probably illuminate the room behind you in that particular color scheme because the colors are so vivid. So a complete masterpiece. I think I, watched this for the first time and I literally turned to my husband and said, I just want to watch this again because it's so good. So, and it'll stay with you. The storyline is so beautiful and emotional and almost kind of like has the twist that you really don't see coming. But definitely, as it says right here, 5 stars, and we would give it that hands down. So go pick it up. Hero, great film. Very impressive visuals and great story.
Yeah, if we were to do a list of, forget international films for a second, if we were to just do a list of the most beautiful films of all time, just the use of color in this film alone makes it a standout work of art, and with repeated viewings you just see more and more, and it just gets better and better.
Right.
Every frame is like a beautiful portrait.
And the choreography is just amazing, and as it, being a martial arts film, I guess we would expect that, but I mean, it's hands down the best martial arts movie I've ever seen.
And we should say, so if you're a fan of the karate, then you'll love this movie. But if you're not interested in the karate or the kung fu or any kind of fighting whatsoever, you will still love this movie because it's got dramatic just content, and the story stands on its own. So you get the amazing martial arts and the amazing choreography, but to say this is a movie about kung fu or karate or fighting would be like, saying that Hamlet is about sword fighting. I mean, it's just a device that's used to move the narrative along, and it's done to great effect. But if you've no interest in that whatsoever, you'll still be dazzled by the beauty of Hero.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Check it out.
All right, next.
Where are we going now? Which country now?
We have Germany. Werner Herzog's Aguirre, The Wrath of God. A true masterpiece. I can't say enough about this filmmaker in general, but this film blew my mind, just blew my mind from a storytelling standpoint to a I mean, it's one of those films where it feels like you are truly there and like you've been there. I have moments where I'm thinking about this movie and I'm like, wow, was I really there? I felt like I traveled. I felt like I traveled through time, and I saw this happen and unfold in front of me. And the as far as the storyline goes, very emotional, very just riveting, and just heartbreaking. And it's just the performances in this film are astounding. So I can't say enough about this movie. I'm sure.
Yeah, it's amazing, and we should almost not talk about it because if you haven't seen this
Right.
movie, then you've got a problem, and you should go fix that problem right now by going to see this movie because it's just that brilliant. It's really the tale of conquistadors, going out into the wilds, into the jungle, searching for El Dorado or the Fountain of Youth. We've all seen it before. And ultimately, it's one of those stories of whatever can go wrong will go wrong, and it gets worse and worse and worse for this group of conquistadors on their quest to ultimately, plunder and take advantage of indigenous people. So we don't want to feel too sorry for them. But I mean, it's a really tragic tale. Interestingly, Francis Coppola has always referenced Aguirre, The Wrath of God, as one of the biggest influences on his great masterpiece, Apocalypse Now. And from a structure standpoint, it's very, very similar. It's people going further and further down the river, and as they get further down the river, their plight gets worse, their sanity lessens, and things just go from bad to worse, and it's just done to brilliant effect. As Kristen points out, what I love about this movie is I've never obviously lived in conquistador times, and I haven't seen a lot of pictures or any real visual reference from that time period, just based on that time period. But this really shows you what it would really feel like. I mean, it kind of strips it down, and it doesn't do it in a glossy way, like, oh, look, we're the conquerors. It's very
Right, it takes its
earthy.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just raw and real, and just a brilliant film. Herzog is obviously a great genius. Klaus Kinski, who's a very strange individual in real life, does an amazing performance in this film as the titular Aguirre, the leader of our group of conquistadors, and it's just a very, very unique film. The word epic would definitely be appropriately ascribed to it, and it's an experience. So, if you think you're going to sit back and, play on the phone and eat some pizza and have Aguirre just playing in the background, it won't happen. Once you put this in your Blu-ray player, you are going down the river with Aguirre and the rest, and this descent into madness. So go see it. You should have already seen it, but go see it. It's a masterpiece from Germany.
All right. So next, we're going
Where are
to
we going?
Russia.
Russia.
We have Stalker, Andrei Tarkovsky. Did I say that right, Myla?
Did perfectly.
This is one of the greatest films I've ever seen. Not just from a visual and storytelling, but from a performances. I'll say that as we like to point out, whenever we're watching whatever it is, it's like a now I'm losing it. I'll just have to cut it there. But
Well, we'll just keep it.
all right. Yeah. But anyway, yes, we like to say that it is no, I've lost it completely.
Well, that's how epic this film is, right? I mean, it's almost indescribable.
But
Defies description.
But anyways, yes. Anyway, but this film is brilliant. I'll say one of the main scenes that stuck out to me was when they are on this like train car type thing, and they're just on a journey. You know, through this, for most of this film, it's just the journey, and it really plays out well on what you see in front of you. It's just the long, slow, takes its time type films, pauses where literally the camera is just on one actor and you're really forced almost to pay attention that much further, because instead of kind of having quick cuts and just go from here to there, it forces you to just kind of like really go wow and take it in. You know, and that's what I was going to say. It's very, man, this is really not going well for me, Stalker.
Well, you know, I'll stalk my way in, perhaps for a moment, because this is an amazing Criterion Collection edition, and I always want to throw in a plug for the Criterion Collection because I love it so much. And just to give you some framework, you know, this is it's a Russian film, and it's representing Russia, and Tarkovsky is one of the great filmmakers of our time or any other time. What's interesting about this film is it's a science fiction movie. That's the genre that it lives in, but it's more of like a science philosophy movie. It's really, you know, you think science fiction, you think laser guns and spaceships and things like that. And this film has none of that. I mean, it's definitely set in a time that is beyond our own, and in a world that's been slightly changed. Not as changed as, say, Mad Max, but definitely a different world than the one that we live in. And something has happened in this area in Russia that has resulted in this zone having strange properties that people will pay large amounts of money to get to see. And to the stalker, whose job is to guide, you know, people, businessmen, whoever, into this zone so they can learn about themselves, learn about what's happened, and seek some kind of enlightenment. It's almost like a pilgrimage. And as a viewer, you are forced to go on this pilgrimage with the characters in the movie. And as they kind of learn about themselves from the experience, you have the same experience just as a viewer. This is one of the few films that people have written like tons of like academic and scholarly text on, because it's just a lot to unpack. You know, so I joke, you know, when I say to my beautiful wife that, you know, it's indescribable, but it really is. I mean, this is one that befuddles you, and it's one that we almost don't want to talk about because it defies description and seriousness. You have to
really
experience it. You know, it's like
definitely
trying to describe, you know, emotion. You know, you don't describe it, you feel it. And that's this film. You feel this film, and I guarantee you, you know, 9 out of 10 people who watch this movie are going to say, "What am I watching? I'm bored. I'm turning it off, and I'm going to go back to watching the game or whatever else it is."
We won't hang out with them.
No, but then that one person is going to see this and say, "Wow, that was." I went somewhere on this journey, and it's definitely one we keep saying we need to watch it again. It's almost intimidating to watch it again because once again, it's a journey. You're on the pilgrimage too, but it definitely needs to be watched multiple times. It's definitely a true experience.
Definitely.
It's the slowest. I would say that you could argue that Stalker is the slowest movie of all time.
Right.
And simultaneously has you on the edge of your seat
yeah.
more than any other movie that I can remember having seen.
Definitely.
And when you marry that together,
right.
the slowest movie but the most intense edge of your seat,
Mm-hmm.
nail biter movie.
Right.
Something magical happens.
And there are so many pieces that, you know, just when it comes to moving the story along and just kind of making you feel that just more emotion than just looking and digging for the plot. Um, just pieces that kind of come into the story where you're just like, wait, what was that? You know, you can't even hear what they're saying or what they're talking about, but it doesn't even matter. It's just about just feeling and watching and just taking it in. So, Stalker.
Masterpiece.
Masterpiece.
All right, so where are we going next? Where are we going?
So, last but not least, we have Japan.
Yes.
We have the great Akira Kurosawa, Ran, which is definitely once again we use the term epic a lot, but we don't use it loosely. So I think we take that word very seriously. But this is a great film. We just watched it again recently, a few nights ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think if you're watching this and you haven't heard of this movie or Kurosawa in general, I wonder why you're watching this. Because, yeah, if you're into film, you're obviously going to be into Kurosawa. So this film is one of one of his greatest, if not his greatest, just from a visual standpoint. Obviously, visual storytelling. All of the performances are brilliant. I'm a huge fan of just all things Japan. Well, I should say we are all things Japan. But also Japanese cinema is something that I am very into, and Kurosawa is definitely one of my favorites. And Ron, it's great. I mean, I'm right now, you know, just like Stalker, I'm at a loss for words because for me, this film is very similar to Stalker in that it just is. It's a feeling for me. It's obviously there's a lot of story there, heart wrenching, heartbreaking. It's funny because it's very similar to Stalker now that I'm thinking about it. It's got that same kind of just tragic way about it, and you're watching and you're just like, oh, why is this going so badly? but yeah, and it doesn't stop. It's from the moment you put it on, it's on the edge of your seat, and then until the moment it ends, it doesn't stop. So, Ron, I'll pass it over to you, my love, with the facts and all of the.
So one of my so one of my favorite films of all time, from one of our favorite filmmakers of all time. And it's epic, you know. Kurosawa was very much inspired by William Shakespeare's King Lear, but he was more focused on a relationship between a lord and his sons versus a king and his daughters. And you know, it's just very. It's a very big story, and when we were watching it the other evening, I was saying to Kristen that. You know, there are some scenes in this film of these castle sieges in feudal Japan. And I said to Kristen, I said, you know, in this sequence, Kurosawa does for feudal Japanese or even medieval castle sieges with arrows what Steven Spielberg did for war movies in the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan. I mean, it really gives you the feel of, you know, bows and arrows and horses, but it shows you that that really was a brutal thing. You know, normally there's some distance between you and that kind of stuff. And I would say that whether it's Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones for you television fans, people have still not caught up to Kurosawa's ability to stage just a big, epic battle on horses with arrows and swords. There is nothing like it, and there are several scenes that are just humongous in scope in this film. And then there are quiet, intimate character moments, all interspersed in as well. A true masterpiece, a big film, an epic film. I would say that it's perhaps my favorite of the films that we have discussed this evening, and one of my favorite films of all time. I can't get into the weeds on whether or not it's Kurosawa's best film. He has some great ones. Seven Samurai, Yojimbo, the list goes on. But this would definitely be my favorite, hands down, Kurosawa film, which is why it's representing Japan tonight, and definitely worth checking out. So, hopefully you had a good time traveling the world with us tonight. We had Mad Max from Australia. We had Hero from mainland China. We had Germany sharing Aguirre, the Wrath of God, with us. And Russia confounded us with Stalker. And then we all wrapped it up in Japan with Akira Kurosawa's masterpiece, Ron. So go check them all out. They're all brilliant. Be ready to read some subtitles, because once again, these are not American films made by filmmakers from other shores. These are foreign films. There's going to be some reading involved, and that's okay. You'll enjoy these masterpieces. So,
all right.
Looks like that's about it.
That's it, folks.
Well, thanks for coming into our room tonight. We'll see you next time.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.